Hello, my name is Blake Higginbotham. Welcome to Home Family Gathering, where everyone has a place at the table in the Father's house. Thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to connecting, communicating, corroborating, and collaborating with you. Remember this, you are loved, blessed, and highly favored. We're going to continue our study today, Christian mysticism, out of a recently published book. Today, we're going to start with Christian mysticism and Western Orthodoxy. As most of you know, if you've done any research at all into the history of the faith, you know that one of the first divides that took place was between Eastern and Western Christendom, and most of it was over 2 points in the Apostles' Creed that they could not agree upon, and that was the deity of Christ and the virgin birth. Eastern Christendom, or Orthodoxy, doesn't believe in the virgin birth or the deity of Christ, or Western Orthodoxy and Christendom does. And I'm sure that some of their theologians and theological notions and ideas also was a cause for the big split. But the gospel that was preached by Yeshua and the apostles of the Lamb really have to be balanced against what's being taught in either Western or Eastern Orthodoxy. And so that's why we're contending for the faith that was once delivered to the saints with these teachings. And we're not going to stop doing that because adjustments have to be made. Christian mysticism and Western Orthodoxy both represent rich traditions within Christianity. Now remember, I'm writing to a much larger audience, so I'm not going to change what research discovered, except in my bullet points and footnotes. But they approach spirituality and theology from somewhat different perspectives. While mysticism is a broader phenomenon that spans all branches of Christianity and other religions, Western Orthodoxy refers specifically to Western Christian traditions, which are generally more focused on doctrinal orthodoxy and ecclesiastical structure. Here's an exploration of how Christian mysticism interacts with Western Orthodoxy. Christian mysticism is a spiritual pursuit of a direct experiential relationship with God, often described as an intimate or mystical union with the divine. Mystics seek to transcend intellectual knowledge of God and experience His presence directly through prayer, contemplation, and inward transformation. There's a focus on experience. Mysticism emphasizes the inner life, the personal experience of God, often seeking to describe what goes on. He goes beyond words or dogma. It's also contemplative practice. Prayer, meditation, and contemplation are central to the mystic's journey. These practices are meant to quieten the soul and open the individual to the presence of God. And let me tell you that in one respect, I do put a high value on doctrine, but in another respect, I put a high value on stilling your soul, being quiet, and allow your prayer and meditation to be one of opening your heart and soul to the Lord, so that you can not only experience and recognize the presence of God, but that you can clearly hear His voice. Much of our praying is praying out of our own understanding, and our praying is based on knowledge rather than what the Spirit is saying. And so sometimes we have to seek Him for the answers to know how to pray, and other times we need to pray to seek Him for the answers. So you've got to determine that for yourself. If you've got all the answers, then you know how to pray. But if you don't have all the answers, it may be all right for you to seek Him for the answers. If you've got some answers, then you'll know how to pray. Then it also speaks to a union with God. Many mystics speak of a gradual process of a union with God. a state in which the individual experiences profound sense of oneness with the divine. Then there's notable figures such as some famous Christian mystics include St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, and Julian of Norwich, and Meister Eckhart, all of whom wrote about their direct experiences of God and the stages of spiritual growth. Western Orthodoxy, Roman Catholicism, and Protestantism. We're going to speak to both and how Christian mysticism is involved with both. Western Orthodoxy refers to the more structured and doctrinally defined traditions of Christianity that developed in Western Europe and includes Roman Catholicism and the Catechism and the practices of the Catholic Church and certain branches of Protestantism. These traditions emphasize orthodoxy, or right belief, along with orthopraxy, the right practice. Also involves theological foundations. Western Orthodoxy is rooted in systematic theology with a strong emphasis on church doctrine and sacraments and adherence to creeds and councils. The Nicene Creed, more specifically, which was one of several creeds. If you do a study on the creeds, you'll find out that the first Apostles' Creed was a truncated essence of what the apostles taught in 200 AD, and later on visited in 300 and something, probably 78 around that time. The Council of Nicene sat down and expanded upon the Apostles' Creed, which I have nothing against, but if you go back and study the Apostles' Creed, you'll find out that there was something not mentioned in the Apostles' Creed. And that was the baptism in Holy Spirit with the evidence of speaking in tongues. So how can that be the foundation stones and fundamental tenets of our faith if it doesn't include the baptism in the Holy Spirit and the gifts and manifestations of Holy Spirit? I'm asking you. I'm not asking them. I'm asking you. Salvation is often understood in terms of grace, faith, and works. Now, I want you to go vet me, make sure that I'm telling you the truth. And there'll be different opinions about what I just said. They'll say that the Nicene Creed does mention the Spirit. Yeah, but it doesn't specifically mention what happened on the day of Pentecost and thereafter with 3,000 and then 5,000 and then those being added to the ecclesia daily, such as the Lord would save. It does not mention what happened with those who received the baptism in the Holy Spirit that were considered John's disciples. It does not mention the baptism in the Holy Spirit specifically with the evidence of speaking in tongues, nor the gifts and manifestations of Holy Spirit. It kind of makes a general blanket statement concerning Holy Spirit. And the authority of the church in Western Orthodoxy, the church, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, is seen as a custodian of the apostolic tradition and the authority on interpreting scriptures. Did you know that that still is a truth today for the most part? The sacraments, liturgy, and teachings of the church are central to the Christian life. Number 3, doctrine of salvation. Western Orthodox Western Orthodox traditions have a well-developed soteriology, doctrine of salvation, often emphasizing grace through faith and the sacraments as the means of salvation. For Catholics, this involves the process of justification, sanctification, and participation in the life of the church. Okay, so if you're a Protestant, then grace through faith and the sacraments means as the means of salvation. If you're Catholic, then it involves justification, sanctification, and participation with life in the Catholic Church. If you're not baptized in the Catholic Church, then you're not a part of the universal church. And certainly, I've said this before, that everything about the Catholic Church is not necessarily wrong or based in cultic practices or in the occult, and is not corrupt. Everything about it, because if it wasn't for them, we probably wouldn't be as far along as we are after almost 20 centuries. We probably wouldn't be as far along, and at least the little light that they have shined has kept us moving forward in the advancement of the kingdom. Now, the Protestant Reformation, I call them ticked off Catholics because we basically took our liturgy and administration from the Catholic playbook and pretty much did away with some of the statues and the saints and the stained glass windows, but still it revolved around going somewhere, doing something, or having something. And so church and the church buildings and the Christian faith, whether Catholic or Protestant, are associated in the minds of people in the world and even in government. So it's not based on the followers of the way and a people to be. It's based on something that has a steeple on top of it, and people park out in the front of it and go in and go and come on a weekly basis, more specifically on Sunday and Wednesday, if they still do that, and other times. So I'm telling the truth. It doesn't have anything to do with being a follower of the way or a people to become or be. It has to do with what particular brand that you claim and that you want to, with whom you want to associate, and that becomes your church. Okay. Interaction between Christian mysticism and Western Orthodoxy. Christian mysticism has flourished within Western Orthodoxy, especially in Roman Catholicism, where many mystics were canonized as saints and their teachings integrated into a broader spiritual life of the church. However, the relationship between mysticism and orthodoxy has not always been without tension. That's the truth. Number one, mysticism within Western Orthodoxy. Roman Catholicism. Catholicism has a rich mystical tradition that has been deeply influential. Figures like St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, both of whom were a part of the Carmelite order, developed mystical theologies that were later accepted by the church. The Catholic mystical traditions often aligns with sacramental theology, where the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, are seen as a means of encountering God's grace through transubstantiation of the bread and the wine. When you partake of communion in the Catholic Church, they believe in transubstantiation. Go look that up. Protestantism, especially in the Reformation, in its Reformation forms, tends to be less open to mystical practices, as the early reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin critiqued the subjective nature of mysticism, fearing it could lead to heresy or spiritual pride. However, Protestant traditions like Quakerism and certain strands of Anglicanism have embraced mysticism, particularly through silent worship and personal experience of the Holy Spirit. Okay? So there's a division among the Catholics and a separation when it comes to Protestantism as well. Well, when it comes to mystical experiences that could lead to heresy or spiritual pride, which we have all unfortunately suffered the consequences of through the divisions of 50,000 denominations deeply embedded in over 300 sects of the religion of Christianity. Some would say, well, Brother Blake, how are we going to unscramble these eggs? Is there any hope? How are we going to fix that which is wrong? How are we going to make right that which is wrong? It's going to be by the work of Holy Spirit and His sons arising and awakening and becoming aware of who they are and contending for the faith that was once delivered to the saints, once for all delivered to the saints, and in some ways a return to our foundation and foundational truths, which is apostolic in nature. Number two, tensions between mysticism and orthodoxy. Here we go. Heresy and suspicion. At times, mysticism has been met with suspicion by Western Orthodox authorities. Mystical experiences sometimes appear to challenge established doctrines of church authority, leading to accusations of heresy. For example, Meister Eckhart's mystical teachings were controversial and led to charges of heterodoxy. His influence on Christian spirituality remains significant. Focus on experience versus doctrine. Mysticism's emphasis on personal experience of God can sometimes conflict with more doctrinal focus of Western Orthodoxy. The mystics' focus on ineffable, non-rational experiences of the divine can seem at odds with the church's emphasis on clear, systematic theology. And then again, the role of the church. While mystics often describe their experience as personal and direct, the Western Orthodox tradition emphasizes the role of the church as the mediator of grace through the sacraments and teachings. There can be tension when mystics suggest a more individual path to God that seems to bypass the institutional structures. So, in some respects, I'll have to agree with the mystics on this point. In other respects, I understand how intimidating and disrupting it can be. At the same time, each of us have had mystical experiences that we can speak to, but as you have found, when you share the mystical experiences of your story, it intimidates people in Western Orthodoxy because they have been raised in an evangelical fundamentalist, cessationist doctrine and theology that has done away with the gifts and manifestations of Holy Spirit for the most part, and it revolves around doctrinal accuracy and church ministry activity. So if you don't think that your story and your mystical experiences will intimidate people, I'd challenge my wife to share her story about receiving the infilling of Holy Spirit, what happened from that point on as a young Baptist girl with most of the people with whom she works or encounters on a daily basis. If I was to share my story about how I was arrested by Holy Spirit and called into a place called Messiah, and I told my complete story about how he spoke to me for the third time, and I said, I will, that would absolutely be foreign and scary, and in some cases heretical to people in Western Orthodoxy. If Mike Harris spoke of his experience in seeing the Lord standing in front of his throne and him saying, there is a God, and he has told me, and he has informed me that when he shares his story with some of the people that he's been running with, that they said, well, that's not my experience, and it makes them doubt their salvation. So he almost stopped sharing it. Well, that's the kind of divide and pressure and issues that we have when it comes to the religion of Christianity, both Eastern and Western Christendom and Orthodoxy. Number 3, harmonization of mysticism and Orthodoxy. In many cases, Christian mysticism and Western Orthodoxy have found a harmonious relationship. That's true, where mystical experiences are understood within the framework of church teachings. The Catholic tradition, for example, has found ways to incorporate mysticism into its theology through the concepts of purgation, illumination, and union stages in the spiritual life that reflect a journey toward divine union, which involves discernment and guidance. The church often encourages mystical experiences, but insists that they be guided by spiritual directors or within the framework of church teaching. This helps ensure the mystical experiences are in line with orthodoxy and do not lead to theological error. Mysticism and the sacraments. In Catholicism, mysticism is often linked to the sacraments. For example, the Eucharist is seen as a mystical participation in the body and blood of Christ. And many Catholic mystics describe their mystical union with God through the sacramental life of the church. That's why that the sacraments and the Eucharist and the wafer and the wine are offered to everyone in the Catholic Church almost on a week-by-week mass basis, okay, because of this belief, because they think that they experience the benefit of the body and the blood of Christ through partaking of the sacraments. Well, I'm going to stop right here, but we're going to continue our discussion for the rest of the call along these lines. Thank you for joining us today. You are always welcome. And until next time, this is Blake Higginbotham with Home Family Gathering. You can find all of my books and music at www.booksbyblh.me and www.musicbyblh.me. Blessings to you and your household and family.
Home Family Gathering is a listener-supported ministry and we appreciate your support. Apostolic Kingdom Alliance and Blake Higginbotham are supported by the generous contributions of friends and family. We are grateful for your continued support in the ongoing work of Apostolic/Kingdom Ministry. Thank you.